Hello friends. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I don't know how to explain the shape of a childhood that looks normal on the outside, but feels rotten underneath. If you've never lived it, it sounds dramatic. If you have, you already understand everything I'm about to say. People always imagine horror as something loud, screaming, breaking glass, red-stained floors. But in my life, horror was the quietest thing in the world. It walked gently, spoke rarely, and smiled politely at neighbors. Horror had a name, too. My brother. His name was Calder. We grew up in a remote part of southern Indiana, deep enough into the farmland that we only had 2 neighbors within walking distance. My parents worked at a shipping distribution hub 40 minutes away, so most days after school, it was just me and my brother in that old, sun-beaten house that sat across from a cornfield and next to a patch of woodland, so dense that even deer didn't wander far inside. I was born in 1993. Calder was born in 1989. By the time I understood anything about the world, he was already an odd shape in my periphery, something I didn't know how to name, but instinctively stepped around, like a loose board in the floor or a patch of ice you don't trust. People loved him. Teachers adored him. Neighbors praised him. Church ladies pinched his cheeks and said he had the gentle soul of a future preacher. If only they knew how wrong they were. The first dead thing I remember was a rabbit. I must have been 6 years old. Calder came into the house carrying it by its hind legs, the fur matted, the neck limp and twisted. He held it out in front of him like someone showing off a trophy. "I found it behind the shed," he said calmly. "Something got to it." He lied beautifully, easily, with eyes that didn't blink enough. My mother had gasped, told him to drop it, and shoot him outside to put it back where he found it. But he didn't put it back. I watched from the kitchen window as he crouched behind the shed. I could only see the top of his head and his shoulders moving. Even at that age, some part of me understood he wasn't burying anything. He was studying it, exploring it. Later that night, I heard him whispering in his room. Not words, just sounds. Soft, rhythmic hums. I stood in the hallway for a long time listening. Calder scared me, long before I knew why. The animals in our area handled most of the dying. Coyotes, heat waves, old age. It was easy to dismiss things. Adults always did. But by the time I was 10, the excuses started feeling too convenient. A neighbor's dog escaped from their fenced yard and was found dead 2 days later behind the tree line. A barn cat disappeared and never returned. A raccoon was found, gutted near the creek, the cuts too smooth to be from a predator. My mother always said the same thing. It's nature. These things happen. But nature doesn't slice clean lines. Nature doesn't arrange bodies. Nature doesn't leave footprints shaped exactly like my brother's boots. By the time I was 12, Calder had developed an interest in projects. He'd go into the woods for hours with a backpack and a small toolkit our dad gave him. Whenever anyone asked what he was doing, he'd say he was building forts or traps. He was lying. And I think my parents knew it too, at least subconsciously. But when a child is quiet, well-mannered, and brings home straight-A report cards, parents will ignore almost anything. It's easier that way. Denial is free. When I was 13, a boy from down the road, Graham Porter, broke his wrist after falling off an old wooden bridge that ran over the creek. The thing is, that bridge was sturdy, solid. Kids had walked over it for decades, but after the fall, The sheriff's office found that several nails had been removed from one of the support planks. Removed, not loosened. Cleanly. Intentionally. They chalked it up to teenage vandalism. But 2 days before it happened, I'd overheard Graham teasing Calder at the bus stop. Something stupid. Something harmless. But Calder's jaw had tightened, and he'd stared at him with that flat, unblinking look he saved for things he didn't like. The next morning, Calder asked me, "Do you think Graham walks home the same way every day?" At the time, I didn't understand the weight of the question. I just shrugged. Years later, I'd replay that conversation and feel sick to my stomach, because I knew now. Calder didn't get angry. He got even, and he didn't make impulsive choices. He planned. Always. Calder left right after high school graduation. My parents cried. The neighbors threw him a going-away barbecue. People told him he'd make something of himself. I stayed quiet the whole time. The house felt lighter after he left, as if someone had opened a window in a room that had been suffocating for years. I went to college in Ohio, studied social work, and built a life I actually liked. I avoided going home for holidays, unless absolutely necessary. And when I did go, Calder rarely showed. He'd call occasionally, always distant, always short. I think a part of me wanted to believe he was becoming normal. But monsters don't turn into people just because you wish they would. In the summer of 2019, my mother died suddenly of a stroke. My father followed her a year later. I handled the estate, the paperwork, the funeral plans. Calder said he couldn't take time off work, and he showed up for our mother's burial only long enough to be seen. Then he left. I should have understood then. He didn't come for her. He came to see me. The family house sat empty for almost 3 years. I paid the taxes but avoided visiting. The place made my chest tighten in ways I couldn't name. But in October of last year, I received a letter from the county citing overgrown vegetation and property neglect. They threatened to fine me if I didn't address it. I should have hired someone. I should have ignored the letter. I should have done anything except drive there myself. But I didn't. And that decision changed everything. I arrived at sunset because fate is malicious and has a sense of drama. The house looked smaller than I remembered, sagging under the weight of vines and rust and time. I opened the door with my mother's old brass key, and a smell poured out. Dust, mildew, and something else. Something metallic. The living room was exactly how they'd left it. Couches covered in sheets, photos still on the mantel, a stack of mail on the kitchen counter that I'd forgotten to throw out years ago. It felt frozen, preserved, as if the house itself had been holding its breath since the last time someone lived here. I went upstairs. My old room was untouched. My parents' room was untouched. But when I opened the door to Calder's room, my stomach flipped. Everything was gone, completely gone. All furniture, posters, clothes, everything stripped out except for one cardboard box sitting dead center on the floor. A box with no dust on top, which meant someone had been there recently. I should have walked out. I should have called the police. I should have trusted that deep instinctive fear that clenched inside my chest. But I ignored every survival instinct I had and opened the box. Inside were notebooks, dozens, each one dated, each one meticulously organized, and beneath them, drawings, anatomical sketches of animals, cut open, labeled, dissected, detailed notes about incisions, bleeding patterns, survival times. The earliest drawing was dated 1994. Calder would have been 5. I shut my eyes and breathed, but the air tasted like copper. Then I opened one of the notebooks. That's when I realized I never knew my brother at all. He documented everything. People in town, their routines, their weaknesses, their medical issues, their vulnerabilities. There were entries labeled Behavioral Experiments, Woodland Sector, Fear Response Trials, Injury Tolerance Studies. Then I reached the section that made my vision blur, the section about me, pages upon pages, starting from when I was 5. Observations about what foods I liked, which teachers favored me, what friends came over, which window I always left cracked in summer, the schedule of my piano lessons, the exact paths I took walking to the bus stop. He wrote things like, shifts weight to her left foot when anxious, cries quietly, never loudly, easily startled by footsteps behind her, falls asleep within 4 minutes of getting into bed. I felt sick. I felt watched. I had always been watched. The last entry in the notebook was dated 8 months ago, written long after we'd stopped talking. It listed my Ohio home address, my workplace, the name of my favorite coffee shop, the time I usually left my apartment each morning. And at the bottom was one sentence. She understands too much. Must be addressed soon. I dropped the notebook. My hands shook so violently the pages fluttered. That's when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I froze. I thought he'd come back. I thought Calder had known I'd eventually return. I thought I was about to die. But the man at the door wasn't Calder. He had a badge. Detective Rex Holden, Indiana State Patrol. He said they were investigating a missing woman, Arden Malone, a 26-year-old who vanished from her apartment on the east side of Indianapolis. Calder's name had come up during interviews. A neighbor had seen him watching Arden's building several times. His fingerprints were on her mailbox. Detective Holden asked when I last heard from my brother. I told him I couldn't remember. I brought him upstairs to the box. The detective didn't hide his reaction. His face went pale. He called for a forensic unit immediately. By midnight, the house was swarming with officers, crime scene photographers, K-9 units. They searched the woods behind our property. They found bones, animal bones mostly, but not all of them. Some fragments were human. The detective asked me everything, about our childhood, about the accidents, about my suspicions. I told him everything I had never said before. When I finished, he stared at me for a long moment, then revealed what they hadn't publicly announced. Arden wasn't the first. There were at least 4 other disappearances over the last decade. All occurred in cities where Calder had lived. All involved women. None had been solved. Until now. Before Detective Holden left, he asked me one last question. Did your brother ever show unusual attention toward you? My mouth went dry. I remembered childhood nights when I'd wake up and see him standing silently in my doorway. I remembered how he'd ask me about my friends, my schedule, my fears, like he was collecting data. I remembered how he never seemed angry at me, never annoyed, never emotional, just observant. Too observant. But the thing that shattered me wasn't a memory. It was what the detective told me last. Your brother rented a storage unit 2 towns over. Inside, we found a large map of Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky. Your apartment address is circled in red ink. I felt my heartbeat in my teeth. He wrote one note beside your address, the detective continued. I didn't want to hear it. I already knew. But he told me anyway. Primary objective, high priority. I didn't go back to Ohio. I didn't even pack. I changed my number, sold everything that could be traced, and moved across state lines to stay with a friend, whose address isn't connected to my legal name. I sleep lightly. I check locks twice, 3 times. 4. Every car that parks near the house makes my stomach twist. Every creak at night feels deliberate. Detective Holden calls every few weeks. There's been no progress. Calder vanished. His bank accounts were emptied, his phone disabled. His last employer hadn't seen him in months. His vehicle was found abandoned near the Kentucky border. They did find something else, though. Arden's body. Buried shallow behind her apartment building. The cuts matched the ones in the drawings. Now they officially have enough to charge my brother with multiple homicides. But they can't find him. And I know what that means. It means he's not running from police. He's finishing a plan. He's finishing me. I'm writing this because people like my brother look normal. They look harmless, quiet, well-mannered, intelligent. You don't see the calculations happening behind their eyes. You don't hear the gears turning. You don't ever realize you're being studied. Not until you find a notebook with your name at the top of a page. If you have a feeling about someone, a deep, persistent unease you can't justify, trust it. Say something. Tell someone. Don't do what I did. Don't stay quiet. Because the truth is, I don't know how this ends, but when the night is still and the house is quiet, and I hear a floorboard shift or a branch snap outside, I wonder if Calder is already here, watching, waiting, deciding when to make his next move. I just pray I don't become another entry in one of his notebooks. Sometimes I still feel that vibration in my hands, the steady hum of tires rolling over an endless stretch of American desert highway. The night I accidentally stepped into a Psychopaths hunting ground. It was October 2019. I had just finished a brutal 12-hour shift at the emergency department in Santa Fe. 3 trauma cases, 1 pediatric arrest, and a drunk driver who tried to spit at every nurse who touched him. I wasn't supposed to drive home that night, but my dad had been hospitalized 2 days earlier in Flagstaff, and the guilt of not being there was eating me alive. So I packed an overnight bag, grabbed a gas station coffee, and decided to make the 7-hour drive straight through. I told myself it would be peaceful. Night drives usually were. The quiet, the open road, the sense of moving forward while the rest of the world slept. By the time I merged onto US 285, the sky was an ink-black bowl scattered with stars. Desert wind scraped across the highway like sandpaper. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat with texts from coworkers, but I ignored them. The only light inside the car came from the dashboard glow and the soft blue flash of notifications. I just wanted to reach Arizona, hug my dad, and sleep for a day. I didn't know the desert had other plans. Around 1:20 a.m., my eyelids felt heavy enough to hurt. I needed caffeine, badly. That's when I noticed a faint, lonely glow rising from the flat nothingness ahead. A gas station sign, flickering like a dying star. No brand, no price sign. Just a half-lit rectangle buzzing in the cold wind. I pulled off the highway, gravel crackling under my tires, and parked near Pump 3. The place was dead quiet. A single overhead lamp swung back and forth, stretching shadows across the cracked concrete. The building itself looked old. Wooden siding bleached gray, windows smeared with dust, and a neon open sign that blinked like it was struggling for breath. Inside, the place smelled like warm plastic and old mop water. A radio played something soft and lonely. Shelves were filled with random junk, engine belts, jerky, expired candy bars, and tiny dream catchers. Behind the counter sat a tall, thin man with a weathered New Mexico State hoodie, reading a newspaper from a year ago. He didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked up once and blinked, slowly, like he hadn't expected anyone. I grabbed an energy drink, paid, used the restroom, and walked back outside. That's when I froze. Someone was crouched behind my car. A man. His back was toward me, hoodie pulled up, hands moving near my rear tire. He stood up when he heard my footsteps. "Evening," he said, voice warm but raspy. "You know you got a problem back here." He pointed at my tire. A small part of me relaxed. He didn't look threatening. Not at first glance. Maybe early 50s, clean jeans, work boots, and a dark winter coat. He had the build of a construction worker, the kind of man you'd see buying lumber at Home Depot on a Saturday morning. But something in his eyes wasn't right. They were too still, too observant. "I didn't notice anything," I said calmly. He smiled. Too quickly, too wide. "Oh, you wouldn't. They deflate slow. Real slow. You drive more than 15 miles, that thing'll shred like tissue paper." He crouched down again, running a finger along the rubber. "Could have been a nail," he continued. "Could have been a sharp rock. Desert roads are cruel." Desert roads? Or a knife? I felt a small pulse of anxiety behind my ribs. "I've got a jack in my truck," he said. "Can swap it out for you. Won't take more than 10 minutes. His voice was friendly, but his body language was wrong. He wasn't offering to help. He was insisting, pressuring. I stepped closer, inspecting the tire myself. Yes, the air pressure looked lower, but not dangerously low. Nothing about it screamed emergency. Something in my stomach twisted. That quiet instinct people ignore right before bad things happen. I cleared my throat. "Nah, man. I'm good. My cousin's a mechanic. He's expecting me about 20 minutes from here. I'll let him handle it." A lie. A good one. His smile slipped like a stage curtain falling too early. "That right?" he said quietly. "Yeah." He looked at the road, then at the dark fields, then at me. The desert wind hissed against the windows of the station building. "Still," he said slowly, "you shouldn't risk it. Lot of accidents out here. Lone drivers. Empty highways." His eyes narrowed. "You heading west?" I didn't answer. He took one slow step toward me. "You driving alone?" My entire body tensed. "I said I'm good," I replied, this time colder. Something sharp flickered in his expression, a flash of irritation, quickly strangled back into a smile. He nodded once. "Suit yourself." Then he turned and walked toward a dusty black SUV parked near the shadows. I didn't waste a second. I got in my car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I pulled out, I saw him watching me from beside his vehicle. No smile, no warmth, just staring. Tracking me like a hunter watches a deer walk out of range. I drove for nearly 30 minutes before my breathing calmed. The tire felt fine. The car ran smoothly. The desert stretched endlessly on both sides, lit only by the moon and my headlights. Then I checked my rearview mirror. Headlights, far behind me. Closing the distance, I swallowed hard and kept driving. Maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was just another late-night traveler. But the vehicle was gaining. Fast. 5 minutes later, it was right behind me. Too close. A black SUV. My chest tightened. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I slowed down. It slowed down. I sped up. It sped up. My mouth went dry. I flicked on my fog lights. The SUV backed off, just a little, then surged forward again. My pulse hammered inside my skull. He was following me. I made a split-second decision. At the next mile marker, I suddenly pulled into an exit, an unpaved service road that curved sharply behind a hill. I turned off all my lights and rolled to a silent stop. The desert swallowed me whole. I crouched low and watched through the corner of the windshield. 10 seconds passed, then 20. Then, the black SUV blasted past the exit, headlights sweeping the dark road like a searchlight. He didn't see me. I waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. 5. Then I started the car again, hands shaking, and took a completely different route back to the highway, one that reconnected 10 miles west. When I reached the interstate again, the SUV was gone. Or so I thought. By the time I crossed into Arizona around 3:30 a.m., fatigue hit me hard. I pulled into a brightly lit travel plaza, One with people, truckers, families, cameras, safety. I parked and stepped out, stretching my legs. That's when I noticed something on my rear tire. A puncture. A clean, perfect hole. Not a nail. Not a rock. A tool. Something thin and sharp. An awl or an ice pick, designed to cause a slow leak. The man had done it. Not earlier. Not when I was inside the store, but while he was helping, crouched behind my car. My stomach dropped into my shoes. He hadn't been checking the tire. He'd been damaging it. He'd been preparing me for a breakdown in the middle of the desert, at his chosen spot. I stumbled backward, gripping the side of my car. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I had escaped by accident, just because I lied, just because I drove faster, just because I trusted my instincts. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. 2 days later, while sitting beside my dad's hospital bed, I saw a breaking news alert from New Mexico State Police. Man arrested in connection with multiple highway disappearances along US 285 and I-40. My blood ran cold as I opened the article. The mugshot, it was him. Same coat, same jawline, same empty stare I'd seen when the smile fell off his face. Police found items in his SUV, zip ties, tape, a towing strap, a puncture tool, and things they didn't describe publicly. Victims had all gone missing the same way. Alone at night, gas stations, remote highways. He hunted people. He prepared their breakdowns and then offered help. Some never made it home. I did. Only because something in my gut whispered, "Move, now." Instinct saved me. Nothing else. It's been years now, but I think about that night every time I stop at a gas station after dark. I check my tires twice. I watch the reflections in the glass. I hold my keys pointed like a weapon. I listen to that quiet voice in the back of my mind. That voice kept me alive. If I hadn't listened, if I had let him touch my car twice, if I had accepted his help, I would not be here telling you this story. I'd be another missing person on another forgotten highway in the endless American desert. When I first moved into the apartment on Willowbrook Avenue, I told myself it was the beginning of a new life, a quieter one. After the divorce, after the financial mess, after losing the house, that cramped little place on the 4th floor felt like the first stable thing I had touched in months. The building itself was old brick, built sometime in the 60s, with a narrow lobby and a permanently buzzing fluorescent light that flickered every few seconds like it was shivering. My unit, 4A, wasn't perfect. Radiator hissed, kitchen cabinet stuck, windows rattled in the wind. But it was mine. Most tenants in the building kept to themselves, a kind of unspoken rule, except for Miss Hargrove, an elderly woman in 2B, who brought everyone baked muffins, even though her hands trembled so badly she could barely hold the tray. Everyone else was a mystery. But the biggest mystery was Unit 4C, directly across from mine. I had never seen its tenant up close, not fully. Maybe a glimpse, maybe half a face disappearing behind the door at odd hours. But whoever lived there had a strange routine, a strange, heavy routine. And I mean heavy in the literal sense. Because the first night I moved in, at exactly 2:47 a.m., I heard dragging sounds from the hallway. Slow, weighty, like someone pulling something that didn't want to move. I cracked my door just enough to see a tall man, bald on top with long hair on the sides, wearing an oversized dark coat, pulling a thick black contractor bag down the hallway. He leaned back with all his weight, shoulders trembling, neck muscles tight, both arms wrapped around the bag like he was trying to subdue a wild animal fighting inside it. He didn't see me. but I saw the bag tear slightly on a rough patch of carpet. Something dark and gelatinous oozed out for half a second before he yanked the bag up and kept dragging it toward the stairs. I closed the door quietly and told myself, "It's trash. It's just trash. Don't start imagining things." But some part of me, the same part that had survived a marriage full of lies, whispered, "Trash doesn't leak that color." For the first few weeks, I tried not to think about Unit 4C. I worked night shifts at a loading dock near the interstate, long hours that left me too drained to worry about hallway mysteries. But then came the smell. It seeped through the ventilation grate between our apartments one Tuesday night in mid-September. At first it was faint, metallic, like old coins rubbed between your palms. But within minutes it grew harsh, thick, suffocating. It burned my nose. It clung to the back of my throat. It was the smell of something boiled or dissolved. And underneath the chemical stench, something else. Something organic. Something that had no business being in an apartment. I banged on 4C's door, more out of panic than concern, and heard movement inside, slow, deliberate, footsteps approaching. But the door never opened, and the smell kept pouring through the vents like poison. I slept that night with all the windows open, the cold autumn air cutting through my room like knives. But even then, I could taste the metal in the air. The next morning, I brought it up with our building manager, Douglas Kane, a middle-aged man with greasy hair who always smelled like cigarettes and stale coffee. "Probably someone cleaning with drain opener," he grunted, signing delivery papers as he spoke. "You know how old pipes are." "Drain opener doesn't smell like this," I insisted. He didn't even look up. "Well, unless you want to volunteer to check everyone's sink, I suggest you ignore it." Ignore it. That was easy for him to say. He didn't live next to 4C. Over the next 2 weeks, the noises grew worse. At night, I heard scraping, dragging, pounding, water running for hours. Something like a saw starting and stopping. Strange metal clinks like chains or hooks brushing tile. I started writing them down, at first as a joke, some attempt to convince myself I wasn't losing my mind. But then the pattern emerged. Every noise happened between 12:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., never earlier, never later, and always from Unit 4C. Once, around 3 a.m., I got brave enough to look through my peephole. I saw him, the tenant, standing perfectly still in the hallway, not dragging a bag, not moving, just standing, facing my door, head tilted slightly, listening. His hands hung at his sides, fingers twitching one at a time like he was practicing motions, or remembering them. He remained there for at least a full minute before slowly turning and disappearing back into 4C. That night, I closed every lock on my door 3 times. Mid-October brought rain that never seemed to stop. Leaks appeared in the stairwell. The building smelled like damp carpets and old wood. But on the 19th, something new appeared. A trail. A faint series of dark red droplets leading from 4C's door toward the service stairs at the end of the hall. Droplets that soaked into the carpet. Droplets that smeared when I touched one with a tissue. I told myself it was rust, or paint, or barbecue sauce. Anything but the thing I knew it looked like. Blood is unmistakable, even when you lie to yourself about it. I took pictures. I emailed them to Douglas with a message saying we needed to check the unit. He didn't respond. The next morning, the carpet was clean. Scrubbed spotless. Almost too spotless. Like someone needed to erase something. The breaking point came on a cold Friday night when I came home late from my shift. I was exhausted, half asleep, fumbling for my keys. Except my keys weren't where I left them. My doormat was crooked. off by just a few inches. And underneath it, I found a key. A shiny, freshly cut key. It wasn't mine. But when I held it up and tried it, it unlocked my door. Someone had made a copy. Someone had been inside. Inside my home. Inside my bedroom. My hands shook uncontrollably as I bolted the door, pushed a dresser in front of it, and sat on the couch until sunrise, trembling like a child. I didn't sleep for a second. The next morning, I packed a backpack and left for a motel near the highway. I told the front desk I needed a week. I ended up staying 12 days. I went to the police. I showed them the photos. I showed them the key. I showed them my notebook of noises and timelines. The officer at the desk looked tired, bored, overworked, probably all three. Sir, unless you saw the tenant physically harm someone, we don't have legal cause to enter the unit. What about the key? I argued. He cloned my key. He was inside my apartment. Any friends or ex-partners that may have access? No. Maintenance workers? No. Then store it somewhere safe until you figure out where it came from. They weren't listening, or they thought I was delusional, or worse, they thought I was the problem. Either way, they weren't going to do anything. On November 3rd, I returned to grab some clothes from my apartment. Only during daylight, never at night. The hallway was quiet, too quiet. But as I unlocked my door, I heard something. Shuffling. Slow, steady steps from 4C. The door across the hall opened an inch, then two. I froze, and from the gap, a single eye stared at me. Not blinking, not curious. Cold, calculating, predatory. I stepped backward slowly and walked straight out of the building, my heart hammering like a drum. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot just to feel safer. Funny how low the bar for safety becomes when your life is falling apart. It was November 9th when everything finally snapped into place. My phone rang at 6:14 a.m. It was Douglas. His voice was frantic, shaking. You need to come to the building. Don't go inside. Just come. Please. His fear told me everything I needed to know. Whatever was happening inside Unit 4C was no longer just strange. It was something far worse. When I arrived, the entire block was covered in police tape. Dozens of officers, forensics vans, fire trucks, neighbors huddled in blankets outside. One officer stopped me the moment I approached. Another walked up, flipped open a badge, and introduced himself. Detective Ralston. He had a grave look on his face. Are you the tenant from 4A? Yes. He exhaled like he'd been waiting for me. Sir, the man in Unit 4C, his legal name is Malcolm Reddard. He's been on our radar for over 2 years. We believe he may be connected to multiple disappearances across 3 states. We've been trying to track him. Your reports, your photos, helped us identify this location. My stomach dropped. I felt weightless. He's a suspect in how many cases? I whispered. Ralston swallowed. We don't have a final number yet. Then he looked at me with an expression I will never forget. Sir, I need to warn you. We found photographs in his apartment. Of what? Of you. My heart almost burst. Photos taken through your apartment windows, your peephole, your doorframe. He had notes, detailed routines, days you worked late, times you slept, times you showered. My breath froze in my chest. He labeled one page, preparation subjects. You were at the top of the list. I took a step back, knees buckling. Ralston steadied me. He was studying you, planning something. We believe he had a schedule. A schedule. A date. An order in which to do things. Ralston continued. Your spare key was found in his kitchen drawer, along with a blueprint of your apartment, sketched by hand. A cold shiver shot through my entire body. What was he planning to do? I whispered. Ralston didn't answer. He didn't need to, because at that moment, I heard a detective shout from inside. Another one in the wall. We found another panel. The building wasn't a home. It was a hunting ground. And Unit 4C was Malcolm's den. It took them 6 days to empty the unit. 6 days of pulling apart floorboards, wall panels, ceiling tiles, storage compartments Malcolm had built himself, false spaces where horrors had been hidden. While they worked, I stayed at a safe house provided by the police. Ralston told me they weren't sure if Malcolm acted alone or if someone else might come looking for whatever he left behind. I didn't sleep much. How could I? When I closed my eyes, all I saw was Malcolm standing in the hallway, staring at my door, planning. Something I could barely comprehend. The story made national headlines. They called him the Willowbrook Collector, the Apartment Hunter, the Quiet Man of 4C. But none of those names felt real to me. To me, he was simply the man who almost chose me. The building was condemned. A year later, it was demolished. In its place stands a sleek parking lot beside a grocery store. Bright lights, asphalt lines, weekend shoppers pushing carts completely unaware of what once lived beneath their feet. Sometimes I drive past and see teenagers skateboarding across the pavement, laughing, carefree. They don't know. No one knows. But I do. I know that someone watched me sleep, entered my home, photographed me, studied me, prepared me. I know how close I came. And I know that if I hadn't trusted that gut feeling, that instinct that something was wrong, I would be gone. Just another picture in a file cabinet. Just another missing person flyer stapled to a telephone pole. But I got out. I survived. Even if part of me stayed behind in that building forever, trapped between the thin walls of 4A and 4C. My name is Caleb Monroe, and when I signed the lease for the loft apartment in North Denver, I didn't cry the way some people do when they start over. I just felt empty. Not relieved, not hopeful. Just empty in a way that was almost peaceful. Like the silence after a tornado has passed and you're still waiting to see what damage is left behind. For nearly 3 years, I'd lived under the shadow of a man named Marcus Hale, a man who never hit me, never threatened me, never raised his voice. Marcus didn't have to. He controlled things quietly, through routine, through checking my phone, just to keep things honest, through picking my outfits because he knew what looked good, through making sure every friend I had drifted away because they didn't really understand me. Everything he did was subtle. Everything looked normal from the outside. And that was the worst part. When I finally left him, when I finally slipped out of his townhouse at 4 a.m. with a duffel bag and my documents shoved inside my hoodie pocket, I spent 3 months couch hopping, saving every dollar from my delivery driving job and pretending I wasn't looking over my shoulder every time I stepped outside. Then one cold March afternoon, I found the loft listing online, a third-floor unit in an old converted paper mill, tall ceilings, brick walls, a single deadbolt I could lock from the inside. When I signed the lease, the property manager, a short man in his 60s named Gerald, asked if I wanted a tour. I said, "No, I just need the keys." He didn't ask questions. For the first time in a long time, someone didn't. The loft was small, barely 450 square feet, but it felt like a sanctuary. The huge industrial window faced an alley, but even the sliver of sunlight felt like luxury. I changed my number, blocked every old contact, told only 3 people where I lived: my sister, my co-worker at the warehouse, and the friend who'd helped me escape. The first few weeks were rough. Every footstep in the hall made my chest tighten. Every knock, even from UPS, made my palms sweat. But slowly, I started to loosen. I bought plants. I learned to cook. I slept without nightmares at least twice a week. I thought healing would feel like fireworks. Turns out, it feels like breathing normally, and realizing you haven't done that in years. But peace never lasts. Not for people like me, who learned to fear the quiet. The first sign came in early June. A package. Small. No label. Just my name in clean, rigid handwriting. Handwriting I hadn't seen in 8 months. I froze in the hallway, my keys hanging from my fingers. Marcus always wrote in capital letters, perfectly spaced, like he was carving the words into the world. This handwriting was exactly like that. My throat tightened. My lungs forgot how to work. I carried the box inside using 2 fingers, like it might explode. Inside was a compass. Old. Bronze. Scratched around the edges. We'd found an identical compass at a flea market in Boulder. He'd picked it up, tapped the glass, and said, "It'll always point you home." Then he'd laughed, like it was a joke, and put it in my jacket pocket. I threw the compass away 6 months before I left him, but here it was again. Or an identical one. Either way, it felt like a message, like he was saying, "You didn't really leave me. I still know where you are. I always will." My hands shook so hard I dropped the box. I didn't sleep that night. For a week, I convinced myself it was a coincidence, a prank, a mistake. But then my email locked itself. Suspicious login attempt, then my bank app, then my old Instagram, which I hadn't touched in a year. I changed every password, enabled every verification. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't hacking. This was him. I told myself I was overreacting, that trauma made shadows look like monsters. But the human mind is good at recognizing patterns it's seen before, even patterns it wants to forget. 5 days after the compass, another package arrived, this time inside a plain envelope taped to my door. A Polaroid photo. Me, walking into the building 2 days earlier, wearing my warehouse uniform. On the back, one sentence in those same perfect block letters. "This place suits you." My stomach twisted so fast I nearly collapsed. Someone caught me going inside. Someone close enough to take a clear photo. I called the police. An officer came, took notes, asked questions, and left. Without evidence of direct contact, there was nothing they could do. It felt like a script they knew by heart. I started checking every shadow, every doorway, every parked car. I kept a notebook and logged every login attempt, every odd sound, every time the hallway lights flickered. I asked Gerald if we had cameras. He told me the building was old. The cameras were mostly decorative, not helpful. My neighbor across the hall, Riley, noticed my paranoia. She was a graphic designer, always working late, always offering leftover takeout. One night, she knocked on my door at 2 a.m. "You okay?" she asked. I lied. Said work. Stress. Said family problems. I didn't want to drag her into my mess. But trauma is loud, even when you whisper around it. She started walking me to my car in the mornings. I think she knew I wasn't fine. Sometimes I felt eyes on me even when nobody was there. Sometimes I heard footsteps outside my door. Sometimes my mail came pre-opened, then resealed with different tape. The worst part? The apartment door had 2 locks. Both worked. But at night, the air inside felt occupied, like someone was standing just out of view, watching, waiting, like someone was choosing the moment carefully, just like Marcus always did. 2 weeks after the photo, I came home around midnight, exhausted, hungry, barely awake. I almost missed the folded paper under my welcome mat, just a corner sticking out. I unfolded it right there in the hallway. Same handwriting, same surgical precision. The note read, "I'm glad you picked this place. It's safer than the last one." My vision blurred. My ears rang. My knees almost buckled. He knew the last place I'd stayed. He knew where I had been before this. He had been tracking me longer than I realized. I locked the door, locked it again, shoved a chair under the knob, then sat on the floor with my back against the wall, heart pounding like a drum. It felt like the walls were breathing around me. The next morning, I marched straight into Gerald's office. I must have looked half feral, hair unwashed, dark circles, shaking. I told him everything, every detail I'd hidden before, every fear I'd ignored. When I was done, he didn't say, "Calm down," or, "Are you sure?" like everyone else had. He said one thing, "Follow me." He led me downstairs to a locked metal door I'd never noticed. Behind it was a tiny room, screens, cables, and a dusty monitor showing grainy feeds from the parking lot, hallway, stairwell. The cameras weren't decorative after all. They were just old, ancient. A maintenance guy named Tanner joined us. He pulled up the recordings time-stamped around the day the Polaroid was taken. We scrubbed through hours of footage. Nothing. Then Tanner froze the screen. "Wait, back up." On a jittery camera angle from the south garage entrance, a man stepped into frame. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray work uniform, and a baseball cap I recognized instantly. Marcus. My blood went cold. He walked calmly, pressed a keycard against the security door. The door unlocked. He disappeared inside. He didn't break in. He entered like he lived there. Gerald whispered, "Are you sure that's him?" I nodded. It felt like nodding underwater. Tanner searched the tenant registry. 35 seconds later, he found it. A lease signed 6 weeks earlier, under the name Mason Turin. Different signature, different handwriting. But the emergency contact number? 1 digit off from Marcus's mother's landline. He'd been living in my building the entire time. 1 floor below me, 40 feet. 40 feet of concrete and air separating me from the man I'd run 900 miles to escape. I watched footage of myself walking through the lobby one morning. Marcus stood 10 feet away, hat low, phone in hand, and I walked right past him. I didn't see him, but he saw me. He saw everything. I felt the room spin. My vision blurred. I was shaking so bad Gerald grabbed my shoulder to steady me. I had never felt so violated in my life, not even during the relationship. This time when I called the police, they didn't hesitate. Trespassing, fake identity, stalking evidence, video proof. 2 officers came. They reviewed the footage. They printed the lease information. They knocked on Marcus's door at 2:14 p.m. I stood upstairs with Riley, holding my phone like a weapon, listening to my heartbeat echo in my skull. The officers later told me he acted confused for the first 15 minutes. Said he was Mason. Said he didn't know me. Said this was a misunderstanding. Then they showed him the footage. Said everything changed instantly, like a mask dropping. He admitted the name was fake, admitted he used a stolen keycard, admitted he'd been monitoring me for safety. That's what he called it. Monitoring. He told the officers, "He's fragile. He makes bad choices. Someone has to look out for him." When they searched his apartment, they found a notebook full of my daily schedule, a list of every store within 2 miles of my building, a printed map with my walking routes highlighted, my license plate number, a set of photos taken from the alley below my window, a key ring with unmarked keys, a timeline titled, "Best Time to Talk to Him Alone." He was planning something, waiting, choosing a moment, just like before. Only this time it would have been worse. The officers arrested him, charged him with felony stalking, identity fraud, trespassing, unlawful surveillance. His trial lasted 9 months. I testified twice. He stared at me the entire time, blank, emotionless, like I was a puzzle he couldn't solve. He got 4.5 years, the maximum. I moved out 3 days after the arrest. I didn't take anything except clothes and my laptop. I left the mattress, the dishes, the plants, the blinds. I didn't care. I needed distance. I stayed with my sister until the trial ended. Then I relocated again. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere without memories. Somewhere he wouldn't think to look. Hopefully. It's been nearly 2 years. I lock my door 3 times every night. I check my car mirrors twice before driving. I never take the same route home twice in a row. Sometimes I wake up with the sensation of someone standing at the foot of my bed. Sometimes I hear footsteps in the hallway when there's nobody there. Sometimes I open my mail and feel the old dread wash over me. But I'm alive. I'm working. I'm rebuilding. People like to tell me I should move on. But trauma isn't a door you walk through. It's a hallway you learn to navigate in the dark. Some nights, when I can't sleep, I think about the note he left. This place suits you. But he was wrong. He didn't choose anything for me. I chose to leave. I chose to rebuild. And when he tried to take that from me, I fought. I kept records. I gathered evidence. And in the end, he's behind bars. And I'm here. Still breathing. Still healing. Still choosing my life on my own terms. For the first time ever. My father died on a Saturday morning in late April 2024. I remember thinking how peaceful it seemed, almost as if he had chosen the quietest possible moment to leave. He was 72, had been battling esophageal cancer for nearly 2 years, and the hospice nurse assured us that he passed in his sleep, without pain. I drove from Denver to Northern California that afternoon, a 6-hour journey winding through the mountains and forests that I had traveled countless times, but never under circumstances like this. My sister, Emily, met me at the gravel driveway of the old Redwood Creek property. Her eyes were swollen and red, the grief unmistakable. We hugged for what felt like an eternity, while the late afternoon sun sank behind the towering redwoods, casting long, eerie shadows across the yard. Mom had died when we were children, so it was just the 2 of us now, the last of the Merrick family, standing in front of a house that suddenly seemed far too large and impossibly empty. Emily began immediately making lists, scribbling them in a small notebook, organizing what needed to be done. I was thankful. My own mind felt like static, buzzing and unfocused. The funeral was small, a handful of neighbors, and a few former colleagues from my father's time as a manager at a lumber yard in Eureka. People spoke politely about him. Quiet, reserved, dependable. Someone willing to lend a hand, but private to the point of secrecy. I nodded and smiled politely, shaking hands, accepting casseroles wrapped in aluminum foil. And all the while, I thought about the garage. It sounds strange, I know, but you need to understand my father's relationship with that garage. It was his sanctuary, his domain, the one part of the property where nobody went without permission. I learned quickly as a child, the garage was off limits, not because of abuse, but because the one time I ventured in when I was 10, searching for a lost baseball glove, he found me and his face changed. The calm, stern man I knew became something else entirely. Fury so intense it made my stomach knot and my blood run cold. He grabbed my arm, bruised me, and for 3 days, he didn't speak. After that, Emily and I, and anyone else, stayed far away. Heavy locks covered the side door and main door. The keys were always on a chain around his belt. When I asked him why, he just stared with those pale green eyes and said, "Some things are meant to be private." I told myself he was building something, a woodworking project, maybe a boat, that he didn't want revealed until finished. That explanation let me sleep at night. Emily had her theory too. Maybe he was hoarding money hidden in the garage. We joked about Fort Merrick sometimes, laughing nervously. Now he was gone, and someone had to deal with the house. Emily had a family and a demanding job back in San Francisco, so the task of cleaning it out fell mostly to me. My work as a software engineer was remote, which meant I could bring my laptop anywhere with Wi-Fi and keep billing hours while sorting decades of accumulated belongings. The first week was exactly as expected. Trips to donation centers with boxes of clothes, arguments with Emily over the phone about what to keep, and small, sharp pangs of grief whenever I found something from our mother. A recipe card, a photograph tucked in a cookbook. And I avoided the garage. I told myself I was saving it for last. But the truth, I was terrified. Not of what I'd find exactly, but of discovering what my father had spent a lifetime hiding. On the 8th day after the funeral, I could avoid it no longer. The house was nearly empty. Paperwork was done. Only the garage remained. I found the keys in a small wooden box on my father's nightstand, right where the hospice nurse had said they'd be. 3 keys on a brass ring, worn smooth from decades of use. My hands shook as I crossed the backyard, the damp spring mud tugging at my boots. The garage was a separate concrete block structure, moss growing on the roof, small and windowless, like a bunker. Standing before it, I realized just how much effort my father had put into keeping its contents secret. I fitted the first key into the side door's padlock. Click. Too loud in the quiet air. The smell hit me instantly. Musty dust, old paper, something metallic underneath that made my stomach twist. The single flickering bulb illuminated the interior. Shelves lined the walls, rusted tools, paint cans, boxes of nails. But at the far end, against the back wall, stood a tall metal cabinet with its own padlock. Industrial gray, scratched and chipped, almost foreboding. I knew immediately this was what he had been protecting all these years. The second key fit perfectly. Hinges groaned as I opened it. The first thing I saw, jewelry. Rings, necklaces, bracelets tangled in a shallow cardboard box. Some looked valuable, some cheap. None of it belonged to my mother. I knew her taste, and she didn't own any of this. Beneath the box was a row of wallets, each different, all containing IDs, licenses, credit cards. Names I didn't recognize. Samantha Winters from Reno, Noah Caldwell from Salt Lake City, Lily Armstrong from Spokane. Every wallet told a story of someone missing, vanished. And then I saw the other things, more disturbing. A woman's blood-stained blouse, a man's belt with initials carved in, a child's pink sneaker faded from age, and an envelope thick with yellowed newspaper clippings. I opened the envelope. Headlines jumped out. Missing, vanished, last seen, foul play suspected. They spanned decades, across California, Nevada, Utah, and Oregon. Every article a story of a person who disappeared without a trace. Denise Winters, Noah Caldwell, Lily Armstrong, all names from the IDs in the cabinet. I sat on the cold concrete floor, numb, unable to process the enormity of what I saw. I called the sheriff's office that night. Within hours, deputies, crime scene tape, and forensic teams swarmed the property. Detective Marissa Green, mid-50s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, questioned me endlessly. It turned out my father's business trips with the lumber company were never mundane. They coincided with disappearances. Investigators across 4 states had suspected him for decades, but never had enough evidence. Until now. During the following weeks, Emily joined me. Together, we learned the horrifying truth. Shallow graves hidden behind the property, remains of victims spanning more than 25 years. The FBI took over as the case spanned multiple states. 11 victims were confirmed. Others likely remained undiscovered. And yet, despite the horror, I remembered something from childhood, buried deep, a night when I was 12. I saw him unloading a heavy, oddly shaped bundle from his truck, carrying it into the garage at midnight. Moonlight revealed a glimpse of pale skin. I never told anyone, convinced myself it was a dream. Now, I knew better. I live in Denver now, back to my routine. Emily and I speak sometimes, but there's a distance now. A shared trauma neither of us can fully process. My father, the man who raised me, was also a monster, and I have to live with both realities. It was just past 11 p.m. on a Thursday when I found myself maneuvering a dented cart through the nearly empty aisles of a Walmart on the outskirts of Raleigh, North Carolina. My cousin had just had her second child, and I had volunteered to grab her groceries while she tried to catch up on sleep. At 27, recently out of a long-term relationship, I was living back with my parents and feeling more like a burden than anything else. Doing something helpful felt like a small reprieve. The store was quiet, almost unnaturally so. A stock boy shuffled along the snack aisle, humming to himself, and an elderly woman studied the frozen dinners with an intensity I couldn't understand. A canned version of a classic pop song played on the store speakers, the kind of detail that sticks in your head long after the tension fades. Or so I thought. My cart squeaked sharply with every turn, echoing through the fluorescent-lit aisles. I ticked off everything on the list: diapers, formula, gluten-free crackers my cousin claimed were absolutely necessary, and some extra snacks for the baby's older sibling. 40 minutes later, I was wheeling the cart toward my car in the enormous parking lot. The lot stretched like a gray ocean under the sparse, flickering lamplights, hundreds of spaces, nearly empty. I'd parked far from the entrance by a broken street lamp because that had been the only spot left when I arrived. I carried 4 plastic bags, handles digging painfully into my palms, and noticed just how silent the world had become. The distant hum of traffic on the highway nearby seemed muffled, swallowed by the warm southern night. My footsteps felt impossibly loud against the asphalt. I was maybe 25 feet from my car, a scratched-up navy blue Corolla that had been my father's before he bought a newer model. Then I saw him. He stepped out from behind a black pickup about 20 feet to my left. Even at that distance, I could feel the way he was looking at me. Not scanning the lot, not glancing around, just staring. His approach was slow but deliberate, a stride that made my chest tighten instinctively. He was in his mid-40s, wearing a dark brown leather jacket that seemed out of place for the humid night, and faded jeans. His hairline was receding, combed back neatly to reveal a forehead etched with deep lines. He looked normal. Too normal. The kind of man who might wave at you while watering his lawn, or help you carry groceries to your car. But the intensity in his eyes said otherwise. He raised a hand, almost a wave, and offered a tight-lipped smile. "Hey there," he called out, still about 15 feet away. "Sorry to bother you, but I think I know that car." Instinctively, I glanced at my Corolla. The second I did, he took another step closer. My grip on the grocery bags tightened. Every part of me screamed to move, but his casual tone tugged at my hesitation. I think you have me confused, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head like a curious dog, and a shiver ran down my spine. Sure, he said. Because I could have sworn I've seen you before. Maybe at the Shell on Glenwood Avenue, or the Target near Stone Ridge Mall. Every location he named felt like a test, a probe meant to corner me mentally before physically. My body tensed as I calculated an escape. I tried to angle left, thinking I could loop around and reach my car from a different direction. He mirrored my movements, positioning himself between me and my car effortlessly. Hold on, he said, his voice dropping, almost imperceptibly. I'm just trying to figure this out. What's your name? Maybe we know each other. I felt panic bubbling inside me, but I forced a level voice. I don't know you. Please leave me alone. For a fraction of a second, his expression slipped. Something cold and calculating shone through, just under the surface of that friendly facade. That's not very neighborly, he said. Everyone's so paranoid these days. I noticed the smell of cigarette smoke mingled with something metallic, almost antiseptic, clinging to his jacket. My mind raced. Was he lonely? Or was that just a story I told myself to soften the terror that gripped me? Then I saw it. A narrow gap between a delivery van and a parked SUV, just wide enough for me to slip through. It could lead me to the entrance, an oasis of light and potential safety. My hands rustled with the grocery bags as I shifted my weight forward. He saw it too. His hand shot out, grabbing my wrist in a shockingly tight grip. Pain shot through me. "Where are you going?" he said, his voice low, losing all pretense of friendliness. I yanked free, but he closed the distance, pushing me backward until my hip slammed into the mirror of a parked car. 2 of my 4 bags fell, cans rolling and clanging on the asphalt. "Pick them up," he said, gesturing toward the fallen groceries. "I'll wait." My stomach dropped. I realized with a gut punch clarity that this was intentional. He wanted me to lower myself, to be vulnerable, to take my eyes off him. Every previous interaction, the casual wave, the questions about my car, the blocking of my path, had been a test, preparing me for this moment. I scanned my options. Scream? Maybe. But would anyone hear in this empty lot? Run? Maybe. But he was strong and fast. Fight? Not without a weapon, and I had none. Then my hand brushed my pocket, hitting the edge of my car keys. I remembered advice my mother once gave me. Hold them between your fingers like a weapon. Instead of grabbing the groceries, I screamed. Not words, just a raw, guttural scream that ripped from my chest and echoed across the empty lot. He flinched, his head snapping toward the distant store lights. That was my opening. I bolted. I squeezed through the gap between the vehicles, narrowly scraping my arm against the van. Behind me, I heard his curse and the pounding of feet on asphalt. I didn't look back. I ran harder than I thought I could, adrenaline pushing me past every ache and fatigue. The automatic doors of Walmart loomed closer. I burst through, nearly colliding with a soda display, gasping out, "Call the police!" The teenager stocking shelves didn't ask questions. He just dialed. I turned and watched through the glass as the man lingered at the edge of the lot, framed by shadows. Then headlights appeared, a late-night shopper, and he walked away, casual, patient, unhurried. Gone before anyone could even see him clearly. When the police arrived 12 minutes later, he had vanished. I gave my statement inside a break room smelling of stale coffee and microwaved meals. I described everything. The jacket, the scar above his eye, the pale eyes, the black pickup he had used for cover. They asked about license plates. Of course, I hadn't gotten one. "Has this happened before?" I asked quietly. The silence that followed spoke volumes. 3 days later, Detective Marlon Grant called me. Calm, methodical, deep-voiced, like a human anchor in chaos. They had caught him, Matthew Cross, 46, a former electronics repair technician, about 15 miles from the Walmart in another parking lot. Security footage showed him using the same tactics on another woman. The casual approach, the questions about her car, the subtle positioning. This time, she had someone with her, and he had fled before he could act. In his car, they found zip ties, a hunting knife, duct tape, and 2 IDs that weren't his. Over the last 6 weeks, he had abducted 3 women from parking lots across Raleigh, holding them in an abandoned rental house on the outskirts of town. All 3 survived, traumatized, but alive. I was his 4th. Watching him in court later, I saw the most chilling thing. His ordinary face, pale eyes, that same blank expression as if he were observing a mundane TV show. Convicted on all counts, 48 years, no parole. But the memory lingers. Now, nearly 5 years later, I avoid shopping alone at night. I circle lots for the closest spots, keys in hand, every exit mapped, self-defense classes taken. The therapist calls it a normal trauma response. I call it common sense. Sometimes, late at night, I think about how close I came to becoming another statistic, how easy it would have been to doubt myself, to be polite, to obey a predator's manipulations. That thought is far scarier than any physical confrontation. Trust your instincts. Always. Most of this started during a period when my life felt suspended in monotony. I was putting in 12-hour shifts at a boutique graphic design agency in downtown Portland, Oregon, and returning to my small apartment alone each night. I'd keep myself distracted with streaming shows, takeout dinners, and scrolling through endless dating apps. It wasn't unusual for me to match with someone online, but the first time I heard from Oliver, I felt an unusual jolt of attention. Oliver claimed to work as a financial analyst, but it wasn't his job description that drew me in. It was the way he talked. From the first message, he asked questions that made me pause and think, like he truly wanted to know me. He didn't bombard me with emojis or push for flirty comments. Instead, he asked what I'd been reading that week, how my commute was, and if I had found a way to make my evenings less lonely. I remember eating a cold bowl of pasta on my couch that first night, staring at my phone and smiling, surprised by how effortless the conversation felt. By the time I went to bed, I realized I was thinking about him. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something more, a warmth that had been missing for months. Over the next few days, Oliver's messages came at regular intervals, short voice clips in the morning with that calm, reassuring tone. He'd say things like, "I hope your day isn't too hectic," or, "I hope you have a quiet evening tonight. You deserve it." Simple gestures, but no one had ever addressed me like that in years. Within a week, he suggested we meet in person. I hesitated. My gut was twitching with a mix of excitement and caution, but I let myself be swept up. The first meeting was at a small coffee shop in the Pearl District, a quaint place with dim Edison bulbs and mismatched chairs. He arrived wearing a charcoal coat and a scarf loosely draped around his neck, the kind of effortless style that suggested confidence without arrogance. His hair was slightly tousled, and his dark eyes carried an intensity that made it hard to look away. We talked about travel, favorite books, Portland's quirks, and I remember thinking he had a story or an answer for everything. He paid without hesitation and walked me to my car, chatting as though we'd known each other for years. The thought that tugged at my chest, that little warning bell, was buried beneath a rush of warmth and excitement. For the next few weeks, his attention escalated in ways that felt both flattering and invasive. He'd show up at my apartment with flowers or food. On nights he knew I'd be late, often sending me little packages with books or trinkets. Every gesture was thoughtful, polished, precise. And yet, tiny details didn't align. Oliver claimed he grew up on the Oregon coast, but once mentioned attending a university in Chicago. He said he worked in consulting, but the names of the companies changed slightly depending on the story. He seemed to forget prior conversations entirely, brushing over contradictions with a joke or a casual shrug. I tried to dismiss it. Everyone makes small errors in stories. Right? Then came the call that unsettled me. He said he was on a business trip in Seattle, calling from what sounded like a busy hotel lobby. But the background noises didn't match any hotel I'd ever been in. Voices overlapping, clattering dishes, even the hum of a nearby coffee machine. He promised to call again from his room, but the call never came. Instead, I received a blurry photo of a suitcase near an indistinct hallway. Something about the angle, the lighting, even the suitcase itself felt off. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind ran through every interaction, every voice clip, every small gift. It all felt too carefully curated, too precise. I did what most people would eventually do. I searched him online. Nothing. No LinkedIn, no social media accounts, not even a single verifiable photo. His phone number traced back to a town in eastern Oregon, hundreds of miles from Portland. When I asked him casually about his work, he gave me a vaguely detailed company name, muttered something about confidential contracts, and brushed past it. The inconsistencies piled up. I began documenting everything, saving messages, screenshots, photos. Then, while waiting outside a bookstore for a prearranged meeting, a woman approached me. She was sharp-eyed, her hair tied in a practical bun, carrying a faded tote. "Are you waiting for someone named Oliver?" she asked. I froze. She said she didn't mean to pry, just thought I might be in a similar situation to hers. Before I could ask more, she left, blending into the crowd. My chest tightened. What had she meant? I dug deeper online, running reverse image searches, scanning old forum threads. One profile photo matched an account that had been deleted years ago. The username was different, the color slightly altered, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The details lined up too perfectly with the inconsistencies I'd noticed. He was someone else. Always someone else. When I told him I needed a little space, his tone shifted instantly, from warmth to something rigid, defensive, rehearsed. He wrote paragraphs about trust and misunderstandings, though I hadn't accused him of anything. Every word felt curated, like it had been tested before on someone else. The real shock came the next day. I received a text from an unknown number. "Be careful. He did this to my cousin." No name, no context, just those 6 words. A second text appeared immediately after, a blurry photo of a police bulletin. Even in the poor resolution, I could recognize the sharp line of a jaw, the subtle slant of an eyebrow. Not Oliver's name, another entirely. My stomach sank. The police bulletin listed financial exploitation, identity manipulation, and repeated disappearances. I realized how dangerously close I'd come. Whoever Oliver, or whatever name he was using, truly was, he had built his life entirely on deception. I contacted the detective listed on the bulletin. Detective Henry Calloway arrived at my apartment that afternoon. A tall man, silver-streaked hair, carrying a battered leather notebook. I recounted everything. He told me that Oliver, under multiple aliases, had cultivated relationships with dozens of women, using charm and calculated generosity to manipulate them. The pattern was chillingly methodical. Establish trust, escalate attention, then exploit financially or emotionally, disappearing before the victims could report anything substantial. Cutting contact wasn't easy. Unknown numbers called constantly, always silent. One afternoon, a small package appeared on my doorstep. A book, wrapped in brown paper, sealed. It was the same title Oliver had gifted me weeks before. I called the detective immediately, who assured me the items were being tracked. Eventually, the calls and packages stopped. Life returned to a fragile semblance of normalcy, though the shadow of Oliver's presence lingered. Whenever I passed the bookstore where the woman had approached me, my gaze scans the crowd, wary. How many people had intersected with him unknowingly? I didn't lose money, but something more subtle, my faith in kindness as proof of character, was gone. The memory of his voice, warm yet calculated, stays with me. And sometimes, when a message pops in from an unknown number or a package arrives without a return address, I remember how easily trust can be weaponized. The lesson I carry now is simple. Instincts are your first line of defense. If something feels off, it probably is. Politeness, curiosity, and hope can all be exploited. And the scariest part is realizing that evil doesn't always look monstrous. Sometimes it smiles, pays for your coffee, and calls you by your first name. I remember that time in my life as the kind of routine people often envy. I worked the evening shift at a mid-sized logistics office in suburban Denver, Colorado. My responsibilities were mostly order coordination and system updates, leaving late most nights when the office had emptied. Coffee on the way in, headphones during the first hour, lunch at a quiet corner table with the same 3 coworkers who preferred silence. It all had a predictability that made the world feel manageable. That predictability made it easier to notice when someone new started appearing in my orbit. His name was Adrian. Recently transferred from another branch, he didn't command attention. In fact, he seemed to melt into the background so thoroughly that some days I forgot he existed. Yet, every so often, he'd offer small, almost incidental observations. A comment about a shipment deadline, a note about the chaotic pace of the floor. Nothing alarming. Just polite? Our acquaintance began with clocking out at the same time for a week. He'd walk beside me toward the staff exit, saying little, but just enough to acknowledge my presence. I assumed he was socially awkward, someone still figuring out how to navigate a new environment. I responded politely, asking how he was adjusting, whether he'd settled in yet. Innocuous small talk, the kind people use to avoid feeling isolated in a workplace. I never suspected there was anything more behind his words. The shift happened gradually. One evening, while updating a shipment log, he leaned over my desk, asking if I wanted to grab a drink after work. There was nothing overtly inappropriate in his tone, but the expectation behind it was palpable. I declined lightly, saying I didn't socialize with colleagues after hours, and thought that would end it. But it didn't. In the days that followed, Adrian found ways to appear at my workstation unannounced, standing silently too close, watching my screen like he had a right to the information. At first, I told myself he was trying to help, an overeager coworker. But soon, he started completing tasks in my queue, things assigned solely to me, tied to my login credentials. When I confronted him gently, he looked genuinely puzzled, as if I should be grateful. Then came the whispers. I overheard him telling another employee almost casually that we were basically a team now. His tone, innocent and soft, sent a tightening through my chest I couldn't ignore. I tried to reclaim my space, shorter replies, avoiding areas he lingered in, changing break schedules. Each adjustment prompted retaliation. Complaints filed against me, accusations of harassment, messages purportedly from my email account implying unwanted advances toward him. Timestamps matched moments when I was verifiably elsewhere, but the logs told a different story. One afternoon, security pulled me into a small conference room. My supervisor's face was etched with confusion and hesitation. They wanted to believe me, but the evidence was stacked in Adrian's favor. Meanwhile, he maintained an air of normalcy, tilting his head slightly whenever I walked by, a smile hinting at some secret understanding between us. HR got involved. I thought the situation might stabilize. But Adrian adapted quickly, finding new blind spots in the office layout. Storage rooms, corners shielded from cameras. He'd appear in those spaces, never touching me, just blocking the exit slightly and murmuring, "We could just talk if you stopped avoiding me." Every alteration to my routine, new routes, break times, different walking speeds, was anticipated. He moved in tandem with my patterns, like a shadow mapped in real time. Even walking in groups couldn't deter him. Papers began appearing on my desk, notes scribbled in meticulous handwriting about effort in relationships or making things unnecessarily complicated. Management tried to intervene, but Adrian's mastery of performance was flawless. Around others, he appeared timid, apologetic, even innocent. Around me, calculated and invasive. He knew precisely when to feign confusion, when to panic, when to look vulnerable. The night it all came to a head is burned into my memory. I stayed late, finishing end-of-day reports, while the building settled into the hollow quiet of post-shift hours. The fluorescent lights hummed faintly, the ventilation system clicked in the distance, and every small sound felt amplified. Walking to the parking lot, the air was heavy, the early signs of a storm brushing across the mountains in the west. My car sat in the back row, and from a distance, something seemed wrong. Approaching it, I realized the tires had been sliced. Clean cuts, deliberate. Beneath a wiper, a single sheet of paper fluttered in the evening breeze. I picked it up. The handwriting was unmistakable. Forward-leaning letters identical to the notes on my desk. The message was simple, chilling. You don't get to leave until I say so. I backed away, scanning the lot, expecting him to step from behind a pillar, from between delivery trucks. The main doors of the building had already locked, leaving only the side exit. My phone struggled to connect to security, the signal weak in that corner. Shadows flickered near the chain-link fence, and my breath hitched. I ducked into the stairwell, heart hammering, listening. Nothing moved. Eventually, a night shift supervisor returned from a break and escorted me to the security office. Reviewing camera footage offered no solace. The angles missed the lot where the sabotage occurred. When IT and investigators dug in, the depth of his planning emerged. He'd been mapping my routines for months, accessing restricted systems, reviewing time card data, even manipulating camera feeds to intersect with my movements in storage areas. Every step calculated, every encounter designed to isolate, unsettle, and dominate. Adrian's removal from the premises was silent, professional, unnervingly calm. He said nothing, but the knowledge of how much premeditation had gone into his behavior lingered. I took extended leave, changing jobs, routines, even the way I navigated spaces. Quiet parking lots still make my stomach twist. Shadows at building corners still trigger a caution I can't shake. Even now, I know that a calm voice, a polite smile, or familiarity can hide something far darker. I didn't lose money, and I wasn't physically harmed, but I lost the sense of safety that comes from trusting the world to be benign. And that is a scar that doesn't heal.